Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that Henry Kissinger, the legendary diplomat, once put in a really insightful way. He famously, maybe even notoriously, compared himself to a lone cowboy, riding into town to sort things out.
Right, the Lone Ranger image.
Exactly. But here's the key part, the nuance. For all that bravado, Kissinger understood something really deep when it came to major world powers. A lesson from history, really.
Yeah, he looked back, didn't he?
He did. He admired figures like Metternich, the Austrian statesman. Metternich managed to forge this, well, unlikely but powerful alliance.
Austria, the UK, Prussia, Russia.
It's even smaller states, yeah. All to finally defeat Napoleon back in 1815. Kissinger just knew, fundamentally, that even the toughest Lone Ranger, well, they need friends.
And that's the core insight, isn't it? That even the most powerful nations, they just can't truly stand alone forever.
Right.
There are limits, real limits to even immense power. And yet, this is precisely the wisdom, this really fundamental understanding that seems to be, well, dangerously getting lost in current American foreign policy.
Absolutely. And that unsettling feeling is exactly what this deep dive is all about today. We're digging into a really insightful article from Foreign Affairs.
Oh, yes. The Macmillan piece.
That's the one, Making America Alone Again, by Margaret Macmillan. She's Professor Emeritus of International History at Oxford, a real heavyweight.
Definitely.
And her piece digs deep into this central puzzle. It just begs for an explanation. History gives us countless examples of alliances, right? Some strong, some fleeting.
Sure, all kinds.
But remarkably few parallels for a major power, especially one like the U.S., historically speaking, just so casually and honestly brutally casting aside its own long-standing dependable partners.
That's the crux of it. The central question that Macmillan raises, and it's one we really need to grapple with, is what is genuinely happening on the world stage right now?
Yep.
And why does this seemingly unprecedented shift in U.S. foreign policy matter so much?
Because it's not just politics over there, is it?
No, not at all. This isn't just some academic exercise about shifting alliances in, some distant capital. The implications of this kind of diplomatic earthquake, as Macmillan puts it, they could ripple out.
How so?
Affecting the very foundations of international order, global stability, and, yes, even your own security and prosperity. It touches the basic assumptions we've all lived with for decades.
So our mission for you, our listener, is to quickly grasp the sheer gravity of this, understand the history that makes today so baffling, and think about the potential fallout for everyone. So let's unpack this. We're kind of used to seeing the U.S. as the glue, right? Holding alliances together, especially since World War II.
The architect, really.
The architect, the guarantor of this whole global liberal order built on partnerships. But as Macmillan's article paints it, we're seeing a very different picture now, particularly with the second Trump administration.
Indeed. Since returning to office in January, President Trump has demonstrably broken from conventional diplomacy. He's adopted a style that's often confrontational, even with the closest partners.
How so, specifically?
Well, he's publicly, repeatedly accused these longstanding allies of being cheaters and freeloaders.
That's strong language for allies.
It is. He's specifically called out Japan and other Asian trading partners, insisting they're, quote, very spoiled. This isn't just about trade deficits. It's a deep, deliberate shift in tone.
One that erodes trust.
Absolutely. It undermines decades of goodwill. It fundamentally changes the whole calculation of cooperation.
And it's not just trade partners, is it? The article mentions North America, too.
Right. We've seen accusations against neighbors like Canada and Mexico alleging they're exporting drugs and criminals.
I mean, that rhetoric just flies in the face of how allied leaders usually talk. Shared values, mutual benefit, common threats.
Exactly. It's a stark contrast. It leaves allies bewildered, maybe scrambling. And adversaries, well, they're probably taking notes, maybe quite gleefully.
What's particularly striking, and the article really highlights this, is the contrast in how the president talks about democratic allies versus certain autocratic leaders.
Yes, that's very noticeable.
While he's criticizing democratic partners, he's also heaping praise on figures like Hungary's Viktor Orban.
Called him a very great leader.
Right. And El Salvador's Nayib Bukele.
A great friend, I believe.
Yeah. And even describing North Korea's Kim Jong-un as a smart guy.
And let's not forget, at least until recently, calling Putin a genius and very savvy for the invasion of Ukraine.
That juxtaposition is just jarring. What message does that send to allies who've stood by Washington for decades?
And to adversaries who might see an opening, an invitation. a shift that benefits them. It forces allies to question the very foundation of their relationship with the U.S.
While sort of validating these strong men on the other side.
Precisely. It's a dangerous signal.
Okay, here's where it gets, as the article suggests, really interesting. Because it's not just words.
No, the actions are following the rhetoric.
We're seeing tangible shifts in U.S. foreign policy. Things that were, frankly, unthinkable even a few years ago, or even in Trump's first term.
Like the UN vote.
Exactly. That February UN resolution vote on Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The United States actually sided against its own democratic allies.
The ones most supportive of Ukraine's sovereignty.
Yes. And instead voted with Russia, North Korea, Belarus, countries usually at odds with the international consensus.
It's baffling. Truly baffling.
Oh.
Especially when Washington says it's trying to contain China and shore up defenses in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. Why alienate the very partners you need for those goals?
The article points this contradiction out really sharply, highlighting the administration preparing punitive tariffs. On who?
South Korea and Japan, two of the closest Asian allies, and a whole list of European partners, too.
Think about that. Threatening economic penalties on the very nations you need as bulwarks against Beijing.
It almost seems like it's pushing them towards China.
It looks, on its face, like it's working against its own stated strategic goals, undermining its own leverage. It's perplexing.
And the ripples go even deeper, don't they, to the ultimate security guarantee.
The nuclear umbrella, yes. The article details these unsettling public musings from the president, from his cabinet, suggesting it might not be a sure thing anymore for allies.
That kind of talk strikes right at the core of decades of defense commitments.
It forces nations that have relied on U.S. protection to face a terrifying new reality. The doubt alone is incredibly destabilizing.
And we're already seeing consequences.
Direct and immediate ones. In July, France and the UK announced a new agreement. They're starting to provide extended nuclear deterrence for themselves in Europe.
Wow, France and the UK stepping up like that.
Think about the significance. Two major European powers, historic U.S. allies, feeling they have to take this step.
And it's not just them.
No. We're also seeing countries like South Korea, Poland, even Japan, long-term non-nuclear states under the U.S. umbrella, openly talking about acquiring their own nuclear weapons.
That's proliferation. That's incredibly dangerous.
It's not just a policy shift. It's a fundamental reevaluation of national security by nations that trusted U.S. guarantees for decades.
Yeah.
The sheer level of doubt is forcing allies to consider drastic, independent measures they never would have before. It raises the specter of a much more proliferated, much less stable world.
So, stepping back, what does this mean historically? Margaret Macmillan, the author, she looked for parallels, right?
She did, and she acknowledges, of course, history has plenty of examples of powers falling out with allies or finding new ones. It
Yes,
happened.
the ebb and flow of geopolitics.
Right, shifting threats, power dynamics. But Macmillan argues there's a crucial, almost unprecedented distinction here.
What's the distinction?
She says, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, it's hard to think of a case in which the leader of a major alliance has so casually and brutally cast aside allies that for the most part have been dependable and have accepted its writ.
So it's the way it's happening, the casualness, the brutality towards dependable partners?
Exactly. It doesn't seem like a measured pivot based on strategy. It feels more like a repudiation driven by rhetoric. She also tackles some of the counter-arguments the administration makes.
Like?
Well, for instance, one in Canadian or Greenlandic resources. She points out those have always been available, threatening annexation, as has been floated.
That's just counterproductive.
Totally. It just stirs up anti-Americanism in a close neighbor, destroys goodwill for no real gain.
What about the argument about NATO defense spending, the freeloaders idea?
The article notes that's partly a self-fulfilling prophecy. The U.S. insisted on the dominant role for decades, dictating terms, which kind of disincentivized others from massive independent spending.
But are they spending more now?
Yes. Crucially, when pressed, like at the recent NATO summit, members have increased their budgets or pledged to, levels unimaginable just a few years ago. Germany hitting 2% GDP target. That's huge for them.
So the freeloader narrative doesn't quite hold up to scrutiny.
Not entirely, especially considering the recent commitments, often made despite the rhetoric, not because of it.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's the underlying strategy, or lack thereof?
Macmillan suggests it points to a profound lack of a plausible overarching strategy, beyond perhaps an outdated attachment to old spheres of influence.
Where big powers dominate their neighbors.
Right. And multilateral groups have little real power. But that kind of world, far from being safer, poses greater threats to the U.S. in the future.
How so?
You could easily see a Chinese-dominated Asia, maybe a Russian zone in Eastern Europe, bumping up against the U.S. Smaller powers resentful or looking for new protectors.
So trashing alliances doesn't make the U.S. stronger.
It risks a general breakdown of stability. It could mean soaring military costs for everyone, trying to secure interests unilaterally, or endless trade wars.
It seems like it works against America's own interests.
That's Macmillan's point. The lack of historical precedent doesn't suggest some clever strategy. It looks like the U.S. acting against its own fundamental interests in a bewildering way, undermining a key source of its power.
Especially now, with China rising and other rivals challenging U.S. leadership.
Precisely. The need for allies seems more acute than ever, not less.
Okay, let's take that step back in time you mentioned. For centuries, alliances have been seen as key, right? A power rule in geopolitics.
Absolutely. Since forever, basically. Groups, clans, nations, they've always banded together. For protection, for shared goals.
It's almost primal, collective strength.
Exactly. And history is full of examples. Think of the Delian League, the Greek city-states.
Against the Persian Empire.
Right. Or, fast forward to 1815, the Grand Alliance, Austria, UK, Prussia, Russia, finally taking down Napoleon after years of trying alone.
What's fascinating is who allies sometimes. Really disparate countries.
It's true. Common cause makes strange bedfellows. Catholic France and the Muslim Ottoman Empire, allied for over 2 centuries.
Against the Habsburgs, wasn't it?
Yes. Or maybe even more unlikely, Stalin's Soviet Union, a communist dictatorship, allied with the UK and US liberal democracies.
To defeat the Axis in World War II.
These alliances show the pragmatic power of shared threats. They could overcome huge ideological, religious, cultural divides, necessity,
But the U.S. story is different for a long time anyway. It prided itself on avoiding alliances.
For much of its history, yes. Geography helped. Japan stayed isolated for centuries until Commodore Perry showed up in 1853.
Right.
The U.S. had 2 oceans, no powerful land enemies, so it embraced Washington's advice: avoid entangling alliances.
Even in World War I.
Even then, Woodrow Wilson insisted the U.S. was just an associated power, not a full ally, maintaining that distance.
So when did that change?
Really only after 1945. Facing a hostile Soviet Union and communist China as a partner then, the threat was just too big.
So the U.S. abandoned that suspicion.
Had to. Entered peacetime defensive alliances for the first time, NATO being the big one. The Soviet threat made isolationism untenable.
And this history makes you think that isolationist streak never fully went away.
It didn't. And we're seeing it surge back today, pushing against decades of established practice.
Back to Kissinger's point, even powerful states need allies.
Not just for prestige, but because great power has limits. It's costly to maintain alone. The Truman administration learned that 80 years ago. Going it alone wasn't sustainable or affordable. Allies share the burden.
To really grasp the cost of going it alone, the article brings up a powerful historical parallel.
The British Empire. Late 19th century.
Exactly. The biggest empire ever seen, maps colored red everywhere, but experiencing what historian Paul Kennedy called imperial overstretch.
Right. Facing old rivals like France and Russia and new ones, Germany, Japan, even the U.S.
Too many fronts.
And even with its powerful economy and navy, others were catching up.
Industrially, militarily. And the British Treasury, the taxpayers, they started grumbling about the huge cost of maintaining it all.
The article mentions the South African War.
The Boer War, 1899-1902. A real wake-up call. Britain struggled to defeat 2 tiny Afrikaner republics.
And the world cheered for the Boers. Largely, yes. Early Afrikaner victories exposed British army problems, and there was widespread anti-British feeling. The brutal tactics, concentration camps, it damaged Britain's reputation hugely.
Like at the Paris Exposition?
Right. Crowds piling flowers at the Transvaal Pavilion, a very public sign of how much Britain was resented, even loathed.
And that was Britain's aha moment.
You could say that.
Yeah.
The shock of realizing how isolated and disliked they were. It pushed them to see that even they needed friends.
So what did they do?
A rapid diplomatic pivot. Reached understandings, made alliances with former rivals. The Entente Cordiale with France, the alliance with Japan, the Entente with Russia.
Oh, pretty quickly.
Within a few years, it lessened conflict risks, encouraged cooperation, eased that overstretch, and let Britain keep its global influence going. Arguably until mid-WWII, Collaboration, not isolation.
So the lesson here, connecting it to the bigger picture,
Is that global power isn't just about military resources. You can count guns and ships, measure economies.
but the intangibles matter.
Hugely. Competencies, organization, effective government, national morale, these are harder to gauge, but critical.
Like Russia before the Ukraine invasion.
Look strong, desirable as an ally for some, projected power. Now, after years of unsuccessful war, heavy losses, maybe more of liability, credibility matters immensely. Russia's has taken a huge hit.
We've seen this elsewhere too, right? The article mentions Afghanistan.
Both the Soviets in the 80s and the U.S. more recently. Failed objectives despite overwhelming military might.
And the consequences.
Dismayed allies, pushed away potential partners, shook public faith at home, encouraged enemies. The article even mentions the Bolshevik Revolution.
Made possible by Russia's WWI defeats.
A stark warning about the consequences of failure. Maybe one Putin should heed today.
And this leads to another key point. Power isn't static.
It fluctuates. Britain won both world wars, but was depleted. Its empire melted away. The cost of victory was immense.
Which makes you ask about the U.S. today. Is it as powerful as it once was?
That's the question the article implicitly poses. It points to failures abroad, Afghanistan, Iraq, increasing division at home, exploding debt, waning infrastructure investment.
All chipping away at national strength.
And add to that, technology diminishes geography's protection. Fast missiles, cyber warfare. The oceans aren't the barrier they once were.
Which makes allies even more important.
Arguably, yes. The imperative to nurture alliances seems greater, not less. The costs of going it alone have arguably never been higher.
Which brings us back to today and a really stark example right next door.
Canada.
Yeah, never a military threat maybe in hockey, as the article jokes.
Friendly rivalry.
Canadians see Americans as relatives, economies deeply intertwined, longest undefended border in the world. A symbol of trust.
For over a century.
And yet, President Trump's actions, talking about the 51st state, punitive tariffs on steel, aluminum, threatening not to defend Canada under the proposed missile defense system unless it pays up.
With the bill constantly rising.
It's enraged a normally mild-mannered people. The article says the mood in Ottawa is shock, disbelief, betrayal.
The very foundations of their foreign policy, that unshakable U.S. alliance, seem to be melting away.
And what's being destroyed won't be easily mended. Maybe not for a generation.
And for what? There's no clear strategic gain, just eroding an incredibly valuable, stable relationship.
That personal strategic betrayal, it raises a huge question. When you dismantle something so fundamental,
the cost goes way beyond policy changes. It hits trust, relationships, deeply ingrained things. Very hard, maybe impossible to reverse. Lasting scars.
Alliances, like relationships, they're hard work. The article calls them constant gardens.
Need constant tending, patience, forbearance, skill, repeated effort.
The stakes are incredibly high: security, prosperity, stability, and the character of leaders, diplomats. That's critical.
Right. Diplomacy isn't just cocktail parties, though that rapport helps. It's gaining deep insight into other nations, their leaders, their interests, learning how to negotiate effectively.
And some communication styles are just counterproductive.
Hugely. The article points to things like publicly chastising allies, like Vice President Vance did in Munich, lecturing them.
Or the constant stream of insults on social media from the president.
Almost daily. Targeting allies. Or releasing letters to heads of state publicly before they're even delivered.
That's a breach of protocol, signals contempt.
Exactly. These aren't just awkward moments. They store up resentment. They make future personal relations incredibly difficult. They undermine the channels you need for diplomacy. Trust, once broken like that, is so hard to repair.
And successful alliances, the article argues, often come down to something intangible.
Personal chemistry. Trust between leaders.
Like Kissinger and Zhu Enlai, opening relations with China.
A key example, Kissinger's ability to build mutual respect, that surprising chemistry with Zhu, it was crucial. Without it, normalization might have been delayed years, changing global politics.
And Churchill and Roosevelt, that's a masterclass in alliance building.
Absolutely. From 1939, Churchill was diligently wooing Roosevelt. He knew Britain needed U.S. resources, guns, money, eventually troops to beat Nazi Germany.
Wrote countless letters, made direct appeals.
And Roosevelt, though constrained by isolationist public opinion, wanted Britain to succeed. He stretched presidential powers to help. Destroyers for bases, lend-lease, lifelines.
And during the war, their commitment, their personal bond.
Was remarkable, traveling thousands of miles, ship, plane at risk to health and lives, to meet each other, to meet Stalin.
Not just formalities, real effort to maintain the bond, resolve issues face to face.
Without that strong personal relationship, the inevitable irritations, the strategic differences, they would have seriously hampered joint planning, vital aid.
And it wasn't just them, was it? The article mentions the network.
Thousands of experts, administrators, military personnel, learning to work together across national lines, building a truly unified effort.
There's another example of that deep connection, Dill and Marshall.
Yes, John Dill, UK's senior military rep in Washington, and George Marshall, U.S. Army Chief of Staff. A deep and rare friendship.
And they smoothed things over.
They reconciled deep, sometimes bitter, divisions between colleagues, between political leaders, navigated complex rivalries.
And that special relationship between the U.S. and UK.
Maybe exaggerated sometimes, as the article notes, but it served both countries well, from the Berlin airlift right through to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
So what's clear is power isn't just military might. These personal connections.
They're the oil in the complicated machinery. They're essential to help alliances last, function through tough times. They provide resilience.
But even with personal ties, alliances have a natural lifespan, don't they? They rarely last beyond their immediate purpose.
That's true. Think about Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. Their efforts to build a lasting friendship with Stalin and the Soviets failed once the common enemy was gone.
The glue dissolved.
Exactly. The huge gulf between democracies and the Soviet dictatorship was too great. Soviet memories of Allied intervention after WWI, strained interwar relations, deep suspicions from Russian history, from Marxist ideology.
Made trusting relations almost impossible once the urgent threat vanished.
The need to defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan was the main glue. When that purpose disappeared, so did the relationship. It quickly turned into the Cold War.
And this pattern repeats throughout history.
Yes. The Delian League collapsed after Persia was defeated. Greeks fought Greeks. Balkan states fought each other in 1913 after beating the Ottomans together. Alliances often expire with their original purpose unless new common interests emerge.
And it's important to remember emotions play a role. Liking, hatred, admiration, contempt.
Surprisingly crucial in making and unmaking alliances. Personal friendships, mutual respect, trust. They're the oil, as we said.
We've seen it since 1945. Good relations between leaders Macmillan Kennedy, Thatcher Reagan, Bush Blair reinforcing partnerships.
Smoothing over disagreements, strengthening cooperation in crises.
But without that chemistry, or at least basic trust,
Relations can deteriorate surprisingly quickly, as we're seeing again today.
history has examples of that too.
Plenty. Alexander I of Russia chafing under Napoleon, drifting away. Mao resenting Soviet superiority. Khrushchev finding the Chinese devious, leading to the Sino-Soviet split.
Not just policy clashes, but personal ideological breaks in trust.
Which forces us to ask, are we seeing a similar deep-seated emotional trust-based breakdown today? And what are the long-term consequences?
For decades since 45, the U.S. was the bedrock of global security. Its alliance network, treaties, bases, intelligence sharing. It wasn't just about U.S. power.
It was broadly seen as a force for stability, often for good, promoting a rules-based order, democracy, economic liberalism, an alternative to autocracy.
But that foundation is shaking now. The article talks about dozens of countries depending on Washington.
Asia, Europe, Middle East. The 31 other NATO members, a pact that kept the peace for 70 years. Formal allies like Australia, Japan, South Korea, vital for the Indo-Pacific.
Less formal, but key partners too.
Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others who just tended to work cooperatively with the U.S., like Chile, Vietnam, saw it as reliable, if imperfect.
And they welcomed U.S. leadership not just because it was strong,
but because it represented hope. Hope for a better, fairer world.
Yet the article states chillingly, there's now a real possibility that the Western alliance is joining the list of ones that failed.
The whole architecture, built over generations, being consciously dismantled. The world's holding its breath.
So what drives this discomfort with alliances? The article points to President Trump's past experiences.
Particularly business. Trump's always seemed uncomfortable with the give and take of alliances. Compromise, shared decisions, consultation, recognizing mutual interests.
It runs counter to his usual way of operating.
Seems so. His business experience was often as the unchallenged boss. Small, centralized offices, hierarchical, not like big corporations with complex structures, outside boards needing negotiation.
His line from The Apprentice?
"You're fired," reflects that transactional top-down mindset. Doesn't translate well to diplomacy, which needs persuasion, consensus, respect among equals.
Even in his first term, he seemed uneasy at multilateral meetings.
The G7 in Canada in 2018, a key example. Arrived late, left early, quarreled over trade, refused to sign the communiqué.
And unilaterally pulling out a big agreement.
Shocked allies. The Paris Climate Accord,
Yeah.
the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
Though ironically, his second administration offered Iran a similar deal later, before things escalated.
Highlights the inconsistency. And throughout, that leitmotif, louder in the second term, we're like the piggy bank that everybody's robbing.
Framing alliances as just financial transactions, devaluing the mutual benefits.
Exactly.
And in his second term, the article argues he's even freer to act on these impulses.
The advisors who offered restraint in the first term are largely gone, replaced by, as the article puts it, courtiers and sycophants, less likely to challenge him.
So the Oval Office becomes more of a stage.
A stage set for a demonstration of Trump's dominance. Appearances, perceived strength, matter more than policy detail or nuance.
He keeps international meetings brief. Seems disengaged.
Often, yes. And the gratuitous insults keep flowing. At NATO, the EU, BRICS, the UN, the WHO.
It's hard to see an overall purpose beyond.
Keeping him the center of attention. Validating his populist narrative, which geopolitically is incredibly dangerous, creates chaos, unpredictability.
This transactional approach, seeing international relations as just deals, zero-sum games, that's core to the problem.
He prefers one-on-one meetings, long phone calls, seems more at ease with powerful autocrats than democratic leaders who have their own constraints.
Assuming he can just bludgeon everyone into submission.
Believing they'll fold if the offer is good enough, or if Washington holds the best hand. That infamous line to Zelensky, "You don't have the cards right now," like it's just poker.
If only it were that simple.
History shows it's not. Nations don't always act on what outsiders see as rational self-interest. Hitler thought the UK would cave in 1940. Putin thought Ukraine would give up in days in 2022.
Both fundamentally wrong. Underestimated national resolve.
And leaders define interests differently. Beliefs, culture, history, personal factors matter hugely. Stalin's world and goals were vastly different from Roosevelt's.
Which makes the price of destroyed trust so devastating in Trump's world.
Where mutual trust and respect do not matter. Parties only work together for immediate interest until a better offer comes.
The assumptions are just flawed. Russia will eventually align with the U.S. against China. European allies will just comply or be friendless. China will always negotiate on trade. Let Beijing have Taiwan for a price.
He seems to assume allies see things as he does. Lose one round, win the next. No lasting consequences for burning bridges.
But nations, like people, have long memories. Past wrongs, betrayals, slights. Trump himself proves that point often.
Right, and trust. It's hard to measure, but lasting relations can't exist without it. Think of Cold War arms talks. Torturous, slow, because neither side trusted the other. Incidents like the U-2 spy plane or the Korean airliner shooting, read as malign intent, reinforcing distrust.
Whereas with allies during the Cold War, there were tensions, sure.
Disagreements on strategy, trade, but generally an assumption of good faith. Shared values, collective security, a willingness to discuss, find solutions.
An assumption of good faith. It's gone now, between the U.S. and many allies.
That's the argument. And it can't be easily or quickly rebuilt once shattered. The Western alliance, as we've discussed, could really be joining that list of failed alliances.
So this deep dive brings us to a critical point. The U.S. is facing what the U.K. faced. The burden of being the world's greatest military power.
A heavy burden, contributing to staggering national debt, straining domestic resources.
While rivals, especially China, pour resources into an arms race.
An expensive escalating cycle, draining resources, raising conflict risk.
And like always in history, other nations get tempted
to abandon the old power for the new, or group against it, sensing decline, seeking new alignments.
And the hostility from Washington has an immediate impact.
Palpable. If this continues insulting, belittling, economically harming long-standing partners, the U.S. will find the world increasingly unfriendly, uncooperative. Nations don't forget.
We're already seeing examples of nations looking for alternatives, hedging their bets.
Definitely. Former allies or uncommitted powers deciding Russia is a better bet, like Slovakia or Serbia, or nations bypassing the U.S. with new trade deals, political blocs, realizing U.S. reliability is questionable.
European nations, Canada, building their own military capacity.
Sharing production, planning, deterrence. Assuming the U.S. is no longer dependable, they have to look after themselves.
The article mentions Canada shipping LNG to Asia.
A harbinger. signaling a shift in economic and strategic priorities, charting more independent course away from traditional dependencies.
The British called their isolation splendid, didn't they? Until they realized the cost.
Too high. Lack of friends made them more vulnerable, not less. Maintaining influence alone was unsustainable.
So Trump's U.S. might find that in the dangerous 21st century.
Those splendors of isolation are vastly overrated, which raises that sobering question. What's the true long-term price of making America alone again? Can it really navigate this complex, dangerous world without the friends it's casting aside so casually?
So what we've really dug into today is this profound, maybe unprecedented shift in U.S. foreign policy laid out so clearly in Margaret Macmillan's article.
Making America alone again.
We've seen the U.S. move from being the alliance glue to, well, repudiating partners. We've looked at history, why alliances matter, the costs of isolation, like with the British Empire.
And the consequences unfolding right now. Allies seeking nuclear options, shifts in trade, defense planning.
It's not just politics, is it? It's the fabric of global stability, security, prosperity for everyone, including you listening. The idea of a truly alone America in this century, its vulnerabilities, something we all need to think about.
Deeply consider, yes.
If you found this deep dive valuable, we invite you to explore more with us. Share this deep dive with someone who values being well informed, and make sure to subscribe to the Untold Facts to get your shortcut to knowledge.